My name is Sophie Caldwell, and I was 32 years old when my father stood in front of 200 restaurant guests and thanked me for finally doing the right thing for the family. He had a champagne flute in one hand. My mother was crying into a linen napkin. My brother Brandon, the golden son, was standing under a wall of warm pendant lights beside a sign that read, "Caldwell Table," in brushed brass letters. The restaurant was packed with investors, neighbors, cousins, vendors, and people who had spent years asking me why I couldn't be more supportive of my brother's dreams. My father smiled at me across the room. "Come up here, Sophie," he said into the microphone. "Your brother deserves to hear you say it in front of everyone." He meant the apology, the forgiveness, the public promise that I would not press charges over the credit cards, the loans, the forged signatures, the business debt they had opened in my name to fund Brandon's restaurant. They thought I had come to surrender. They thought the folder in my hand held the release form they had been pressuring me to sign for months. They thought I was still the daughter who fixed problems quietly so no one else had to feel ashamed. But the folder did not hold a release. It held a police report, a fraud affidavit, 14 pages of credit history, IP logs, bank correspondence, and a signed purchase agreement showing that the building Brandon was celebrating in did not belong to his landlord anymore. It belonged to me. So I walked to the front of the restaurant, took the microphone from my father's hand, looked at my brother and said, "Before I apologize, I think everyone should know who really paid for this place." The room went silent. Brandon's face drained of color. My mother whispered, "Sophie, don't." But she was 2 years too late. Before I tell you what happened inside Caldwell Table that night, I need to take you back to the day I found out my life had been stolen on paper. It was a Wednesday in March. Rainy, cold. Philadelphia in that gray sideways way that makes every street look like it has given up. I was sitting across from a mortgage officer named Denise Patel in a glass conference room at First Harbor Bank, trying not to smile too much. I had spent 8 years saving for a condo. 8 years. No vacations that required flights. No new car. No expensive wardrobe. No dinners I could not justify. I was a senior compliance analyst for a medical billing company, which meant I spent my days finding errors other people hoped no one would notice. It was not glamorous, but it paid well enough, and I was good at it. Good at patterns. Good at receipts. Good at noticing when one number did not belong beside another. The condo was in Queen Village. 1 bedroom, exposed brick, tall windows, a tiny balcony just big enough for 2 chairs and a basil plant. I had already named the basil in my head. That is how far gone I was. Denise smiled at me over her laptop. "Your income is strong. Your employment history is stable, and your down payment is excellent," she said. Then her smile changed. Not disappeared. Changed. Professional concern has a very specific shape. "There is just one issue." My stomach tightened. "What issue?" She turned the laptop slightly, but not enough for me to see the screen clearly. "Your debt-to-income ratio is far higher than expected." I laughed because I thought she had opened the wrong file. "That cannot be right. I have student loans, but they are nearly paid down. 1 credit card. I pay it off monthly." Denise looked uncomfortable. "There are several accounts here. 3 business credit cards, 2 personal lines of credit, and a small business loan." The room tilted. "I do not own a business." She stopped typing. "Ms. Caldwell, are you aware of a company called Caldwell Table Hospitality, LLC? My mouth went dry. Caldwell Table. My brother Brandon's dream. His future restaurant. His obsession since culinary school, even though he had dropped out after 11 months, because as my father put it, creative people do not thrive in rigid systems. I stared at Denise. "That is my brother's company." She looked at the screen again. "Your social security number appears on multiple guarantor forms." "Number." The word came out too quickly. "Too small." "No, that is not possible." Denise folded her hands. "I am not saying you signed them. I am telling you what is being reported." She printed the credit summary for me. I remember the sound of the printer, warm paper sliding into the tray like a verdict. When she handed it across the desk, I saw my name, Sophie Ann Caldwell. My address, my social security number partially masked, and below it, a debt total I had never seen before. $118,642. My hands went numb. Denise said words about disputes, freezes, identity theft reports, lender verification. I heard almost none of them. I was staring at one line. Caldwell Table Hospitality, LLC. Primary guarantor, Sophie A. Caldwell. I walked out of the bank into the rain without opening my umbrella. The condo with the balcony and the basil plant slipped away before I even reached the sidewalk. By the time I got to my car, I knew exactly who had done it. Not because I wanted to, because family patterns are still patterns. My brother Brandon had always been expensive. That was the polite word my mother used. Brandon has big dreams. Brandon needs a little help getting started. Brandon is not built for ordinary paths. When I was 10, he left his bike in the driveway, and Dad backed over it. He got a new bike. When I was 12, I asked for a used keyboard because I wanted to learn piano. Dad said we needed to be careful with money. When Brandon was 16, he wanted to attend a summer cooking program in Italy. My parents refinanced the kitchen. That was not a metaphor. They literally refinanced the kitchen remodel to pay for him to spend 6 weeks making pasta in Tuscany. He came home with an accent that lasted 4 days and a conviction that he was destined for greatness. My father, William Caldwell, owned a small commercial real estate appraisal firm. He loved numbers when they served him. He loved risk when someone else carried it. My mother, Elaine, had spent her life arranging our family's story into something more flattering than the facts. If Brandon failed, he was exploring. If I hesitated, I lacked confidence. If Brandon needed money, he was investing in his future. If I asked for help, I was old enough to be responsible. By the time we were adults, the family roles were set. Brandon dreamed. I stabilized. Brandon announced. I researched. Brandon took. I absorbed. I did not know how deep that last one went until the mortgage officer placed my stolen life on printer paper. That night, I drove to my parents' house in Cherry Hill with the credit summary on the passenger seat. It was the house where I grew up, a brick colonial with white columns my father thought made him look established. Brandon's car was in the driveway. Of course, a leased black Range Rover with temporary plates. The kind of car people drive when they want lenders to believe confidence is collateral. I walked in without knocking because some habits survive even after love does not. They were in the kitchen, Mom at the island with a glass of white wine, Dad reading something on his tablet, Brandon leaning against the counter scrolling through his phone, wearing a linen shirt that looked allergic to work. He looked up and smiled. Soph. Perfect timing. We were just talking about the soft opening. I placed the credit summary on the island. Nobody moved. Dad's eyes went to the paper first. Then Brandon's. Then Mom's. That order told me everything. What is this? I asked. Dad sighed. Not surprised. Annoyed. Sophie, before you get emotional. The first words out of his mouth confirmed the crime. I almost laughed. Before I get emotional, Brandon straightened. It is not what it looks like. It looks like my social security number is attached to $118,000 of business debt for your restaurant. Mom put down her wine. Honey, your father was going to explain. When Dad stood. We needed a guarantor with strong credit. Yours was the strongest in the family. I looked at him. You used my identity. Do not use loaded language. What language would you prefer? Borrowed my social security number. Brandon ran a hand through his hair. It was temporary. The restaurant is going to take off. Once we open, we refinance everything under the business. You forged my signature. Dad's jaw tightened. It was an electronic authorization. These things are not as dramatic as you make them. You impersonated me. Mom's voice broke. We are family. Families help each other. I turned to her. Did you know? Her face crumpled. That was answer enough. I stepped back from the island. How could you? Brandon finally looked irritated. Not ashamed. Irritated. You were not using your credit for anything important. There are sentences that break something so cleanly the sound arrives later. I stared at my brother. I was buying a home. No one spoke. I saw it then. The tiny flicker across my father's face. He knew. Maybe not the condo specifically, but he knew I had been saving. He had known there might be consequences. He had decided Brandon's dream was worth more than my future. Dad lifted his chin. We will fix it. How? The restaurant opens in 8 months. Cash flow will improve. You can wait. My mortgage was denied today. Mom whispered, "Oh, Sophie." Not horror. Not apology. Pity. I hated her pity more than my father's arrogance. Dad said, "Then the timing is unfortunate." Unfortunate. That was the word he chose for theft. I picked up the credit summary. I am filing a police report. The kitchen exploded. Mom gasped. Brandon cursed. Dad's hand slammed against the island. You will do no such thing. I looked at him. For a moment, I was 14 again, being told not to embarrass the family because Brandon had stolen my babysitting money and blamed it on me. Then I remembered the mortgage officer, the rain, the basil plant that would never sit on my balcony. I will do exactly that. Dad stepped closer. If you make this legal, you will destroy your brother. No, I said. You already did that. You just used my name to do it. I wish I could tell you I went straight to the police. I did not. That is the part people who have never been betrayed by family do not understand. You do not immediately become brave. First you become confused, then ashamed, then furious, then confused again because the people who hurt you keep speaking in the language of love. For 2 weeks my family called non-stop, Mom crying, Brandon apologizing without admitting anything, Dad threatening, then softening, then threatening again. Text messages arrived at all hours. Sophie, please think about what this will do to your mother. Sophie, your brother made a mistake, but prison really. Sophie, you can still get a condo later. Sophie family does not involve police. That last one came from Dad. I stared at it for a long time. Then I created a folder on my laptop called Caldwell Evidence. I saved everything. The credit report, the bank summary, text messages, voicemails transcribed through an app, screenshots of Brandon's restaurant Instagram, where he posted photos of imported tiles, custom chairs, and captions about building a legacy from scratch. From scratch. With my stolen credit, I froze my credit with all 3 bureaus. I filed disputes. I called every lender listed. That is how I met Marisol Grant. She was a fraud investigator at Harborline Commercial Credit, the lender attached to the largest business loan. Her voice was calm in the way people become calm when they have seen too much to be surprised. Ms. Caldwell, she said, we have your signed electronic guarantee on file. I did not sign it. We will need an identity theft affidavit, a police report, and a written statement. I am preparing those. She paused, then asked, do you recognize the IP address used for the application? I did not know how I could possibly recognize an IP address. She sent the login record. The application had been completed from a residential internet connection in Cherry Hill, my parents' house. Timestamp November 14th, 9:42 p.m. I checked my calendar. That night, I had been in Philadelphia at a compliance seminar. I had the badge, photo, parking receipt, and email confirmation. Marisol asked for all of it. I sent everything. Then she said, there is something else. My stomach tightened. What? There were 2 failed attempts before the successful submission. Different answers to security questions. Whoever completed this had some personal information, but not all of it. Like what? Your mother's maiden name was correct. Your first car was incorrect twice before it was changed. My first car, a blue Honda Civic I bought myself at 24. My father had called it sensible but ugly. I knew then he had been sitting at his kitchen island, answering questions about my life well enough to steal it, not well enough to care about it. That night, I went to the police station. The officer at the desk asked whether I was sure I wanted to file against family. I said I am filing against whoever used my identity. He looked at me for a long moment, then handed me the form. I filled it out with a black pen and hands that shook only once. The family dinner happened 3 days later. Not because I wanted it, because my mother said she was having chest pains and Dad said I was killing her. That was how they pulled me back into rooms. They made my boundaries sound like medical emergencies. I arrived at their house with my phone recording in my purse. Pennsylvania is a two-party consent state for audio recording, so I did not plan to use it legally. I needed it for myself, to remember, to stop them from rearranging my own mind. The dining room table was set like Thanksgiving, even though it was April. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, a bottle of wine no one opened. Brandon's girlfriend Tara was there sitting very straight, looking like someone who had been told one version of a story and was beginning to suspect subtitles. Dad sat at the head, Mom beside him, Brandon across from me. It took 7 minutes for Dad to produce the document. A settlement agreement. He slid it across the table. I did not touch it. "What is this?" "A family resolution," he said. "It says I agree the accounts were authorized. It says, you agree not to pursue criminal claims in exchange for repayment from the restaurant over time." "What time?" "When the business becomes profitable." I looked at Brandon. "So never—" His face reddened. Tara looked at him sharply. Dad said, "Do not be childish." I read the first page. The language was clean. Too clean. Someone had helped him. My father had turned identity theft into a payment plan. Mom's eyes were red. "Please, Sophie, your brother's opening is in 6 months. Investors are coming in. If this gets out, everything collapses. Everything already collapsed. It just landed on me first." Brandon leaned forward. "Do you want me to fail? I want you to be honest. I am trying to build something. With my name. With family support. I did not support this." Dad's voice hardened. "Sign the agreement." "Number." He stared at me. "You are being vindictive." "No, I am being accurate." Tara spoke for the first time. "Brandon, did you sign her name?" He opened his mouth. Dad answered for him. "This is not your concern." Tara's chair scraped back. "That means yes." Brandon reached for her hand. "Tara, wait." She stood. "My father went to prison for check fraud when I was 12, she said quietly. "Do not ever ask me to sit at a table and pretend this is a misunderstanding." Then she walked out. Brandon stared after her, stunned, as if honesty were an unexpected guest. Mom began crying. Dad pointed at me. "Look what you have done." There it was, the family motto. If Brandon stole, I had caused distress by noticing. I stood. "I filed the police report yesterday." Mom made a sound like something tearing. Brandon shot to his feet. "You what?" Dad's face went white. I picked up the settlement agreement and placed it back in front of him. "You should have given me a better document." Then I left. The next year was not satisfying. That is important. People want justice to arrive like thunder. Mostly it arrives as paperwork. Police reports, fraud affidavits, credit bureau disputes, certified letters, calls from lenders, more calls from lenders, emails with subject lines like request for additional verification and case review pending. My mortgage denial did not reverse. The condo sold to someone else. For months I drove past the building anyway. I do not know why. Maybe grief has roots. At work I told my boss Andrea part of the truth. She listened, then said, "Take Friday afternoons for the next month. Use the time for calls." "I cannot ask for that." "You did not ask. I am offering." That made me cry harder than the fraud. Kindness often does when you are used to negotiating for crumbs. My credit score dropped nearly 200 points before the first account was removed. Then another. Then 2 more. The personal lines took longer. The business loan was worst because my name appeared as guarantor in multiple places. Marisol stayed in contact. She could not tell me everything, but she told me enough. The signatures did not match. The IP logs were consistent with my parents' residence. The email used for verification had been created 2 days before the application. Sophie.Caldwell.finance@gmail.com. Not mine. The phone number was a prepaid number. purchased at a convenience store near my parents' house. At some point, evidence stopped feeling like a weapon and started feeling like a map. A map out. My family went quiet at first. Then loud. Aunt Lydia called to say I was breaking my mother's heart. Cousin Paul texted that Brandon was depressed and I should show compassion. My grandmother sent a card with a prayer inside and a note that said, "Your father says you are confused." I sent her copies of the police report and the credit summary. She did not write back. 2 months later, she sent me $500 and a note. "I am sorry I believed the loudest person." That note stayed on my refrigerator for a year. Meanwhile, Brandon's restaurant construction limped forward. Caldwell Table had already signed a lease on a corner building in Fishtown, a beautiful old brick space with tall windows and a pressed tin ceiling. The landlord was an older woman named Mrs. Vivian Alden, whose late husband had owned the building for 30 years. I knew this because Harborline Commercial Credit had financed some of the tenant improvements, and because my job had trained me to read public records when numbers stopped making sense. The more I looked, the more I saw. Mechanics' liens from contractors, unpaid invoices, a liquor license application delayed due to financing questions, a lease amendment, a notice of default filed, then withdrawn, then filed again. Brandon was not building a restaurant. He was building a stage set on top of a sinkhole. One Friday in November, Marisol called. "I cannot give legal advice," she said. "That sentence always means something interesting is coming." She almost laughed. "The business loan is being accelerated. Harborline is likely to sell the note or pursue collection. Your identity theft claim has been accepted internally. You are being removed as guarantor." I sat down. "Say that again." "You are being removed as guarantor. It will take time to reflect across every report, but internally, the debt is no longer being pursued against you." I covered my mouth, not to stop crying, to stop the sound that came out of me from frightening my coworkers. Marisol continued, "There may be criminal referral. That is not your decision." "I understand." "And Ms. Caldwell." "Yes, change every security question you have ever used." "Good advice." I did. The opportunity came from Mrs. Alden. I did not seek it, not at first. She called me after finding my name in the fraud packet sent through her attorney. Her voice was thin but firm. "I was told you were an investor in your brother's restaurant," she said. "I am not. I am a victim of identity theft." I thought as much. We met at a coffee shop in Old City. She was 78, elegant with white hair pinned back and hands that trembled when she lifted her cup. "My husband bought that building in 1989, she said. "It was supposed to be retirement income. Your brother has missed 2 rent payments and blamed delays on you." "On me?" He said his sister controlled finance and was being difficult. I laughed once. Sharp. Mrs. Alden did not smile. "I have had enough difficult men to know when one is using a woman's name as a shield." She wanted out. The building had become a burden. Her children lived in Oregon. She did not want court. She wanted clean money and peace. I did not have clean money enough to buy a building. But my boss, Andrea, connected me with a client who specialized in small commercial property partnerships. I invested my savings. My grandmother's unexpected $500 became symbolic more than practical. Andrea invested. 2 colleagues invested. Mrs. Alden held a small seller-financed note. We formed 1429 Frankfurt Holdings, LLC. Quietly, legally, carefully. By February, we had an agreement to purchase the building subject to existing lease terms and default remedies. By March, it closed. The deed recorded on a rainy Thursday morning, almost exactly 1 year after the mortgage officer told me my life had been stolen. I stood outside the recorder's office with a paper cup of coffee and shook so badly I spilled some on my coat. I owned part of the building my brother had used my name to finance. Not because I wanted revenge, because I understood risk now, and because Mrs. Alden deserved peace. And maybe because some part of me wanted one thing in this story to be mine on paper. Brandon did not know. My parents did not know. They were too busy planning the grand opening. Caldwell Table launched in April. The invitations were thick cream cardstock. I received one in the mail. Not from Brandon, from my mother. Across the bottom in her handwriting. Please come. It would mean so much to your brother. This is the moment our family heals. Our family heals. Not apologizes. Not accounts. Heals. As if time were a disinfectant. 2 days later, Dad called. I let it go to voicemail. Sophie, this has gone far enough. Brandon's opening is important. Investors will be there. Press may be there. We expect you to attend and behave graciously. Your brother is prepared to acknowledge your support publicly. This can still be repaired if you choose maturity. I saved the voicemail. Then I called my attorney, Dana Cho. Dana had been recommended by Marisol's network. She was direct, expensive, and worth every dollar. Do you want to attend? She asked. Yes. Why? Because my father is going to try to use the room against me. Then we use documents. I thought you would say, do not go. I would if you wanted peace. You sound like you want closure. Is that legally recognized? No, but it is emotionally admissible. I laughed for the first time that day. Dana attended as my guest. So did Andrea. So did unexpectedly Tara. Brandon's ex-girlfriend called me 2 days before the opening. I heard about the building, she said. How? I work for a law firm now. Real estate filings are not secrets. I waited. She said I want to be there. Why? Because I sat at that dinner and let your father talk over me. I do not want to be that woman twice. So she came. Caldwell Table looked beautiful. I will give Brandon that. Warm lighting, walnut tables, open kitchen, copper pans hung like jewelry. A mural of our grandmother's handwritten recipes covered one wall, which made me angrier than I expected because Grandma had never once trusted Brandon with her cast iron skillet. The room buzzed with admiration. Guests held sparkling wine. A local food blogger filmed the bar. My parents stood near the entrance receiving congratulations as if they had personally invented hospitality. Brandon wore a chef's coat with his name embroidered in navy thread. He looked happy. That hurt. Not because I wanted him miserable, because he had built happiness out of materials stolen from me. At 7:30, my father tapped a spoon against a glass. The room quieted. Thank you all for being here, he said. Tonight is the fulfillment of my son's dream. Applause. Brandon smiled modestly. Mom dabbed her eyes. Dad continued. Families build legacies together. Sometimes there are disagreements, misunderstandings. But at the end of the day, blood is blood. Dana leaned close to me. Here it comes. Dad smiled in my direction. I especially want to acknowledge my daughter Sophie. There have been difficult moments, but tonight she is here to show that family comes first. Heads turned. I felt heat climb my neck, not shame. Adrenaline. Dad lifted the microphone. Come up here, Sophie. Your brother deserves to hear you say it in front of everyone. I walked forward with the folder in my hand. The room applauded politely. My mother whispered, "Thank you," as I passed. Brandon's smile trembled. Maybe he believed I had folded. Maybe he needed to. I took the microphone, looked at my father, then my brother, then the room. Before I apologize, I said I think everyone should know who really paid for this place. The silence was immediate. Total. Beautiful in a terrible way. My father reached for the microphone. Dana stepped forward. I would not, she said. He froze. She did not raise her voice. Some people do not have to. I opened the folder. My name is Sophie Caldwell. I am Brandon Caldwell's sister. 1 year ago, my mortgage was denied because I discovered $118,642 in credit cards, lines of credit, and business debt attached to Caldwell Table Hospitality, LLC, using my social security number and forged electronic signatures. A murmur moved through the restaurant. Brandon whispered Sophie. I ignored him. This is the police report. This is the identity theft affidavit. These are the credit bureau disputes. These are the IP logs showing applications submitted from my parents' house in Cherry Hill while I was physically documented at a work conference in Philadelphia. Mom sat down, not gracefully, as if her knees had been cut. I continued. This is correspondence from Harbor Line Commercial Credit confirming I was removed as guarantor after their fraud review. An investor near the bar said, "What?" A vendor folded his arms. The food blogger's camera was still recording. Dad's voice came out low and furious. "Stop this!" I looked at him. "Number?" The word landed harder than I expected, maybe because it was the first time I had said it in a room full of his audience. Dana took the microphone briefly. "My client will not be signing any release of claims tonight or ever. Any further attempt to pressure her into accepting liability for fraudulent debt will be referred to counsel." She handed the microphone back. I turned to Brandon. "You told people I was difficult because I controlled the financing. I did not. I was never an investor. I was never a guarantor. I was never your safety net. You used my name because yours was not good enough to borrow against." His face twisted. "I was going to pay it back. You could not pay rent." That created a second silence. Different. Sharper, Mrs. Alden, who had come in quietly and stood near the host stand, stepped forward. Brandon saw her and paled. "I said one more thing. The building was sold last month." Dad stared. "What?" Dana opened a second document. The prior owner, Mrs. Vivian Alden, sold this property to 1429 Frankfurt Holdings, LLC. I am managing partner. Brandon gripped the back of a chair. "You bought my building." "No, I bought the building you were already defaulting on." My father looked like he might explode. "You vindictive little—" Andrea stepped forward then. "Careful, William." My father turned on her. "Who are you?" "One of Sophie's partners. Also someone who can read a balance sheet." A laugh moved through the room before people remembered not to. I did not smile. This was not comedy. This was a funeral for a lie. I faced the guests. Caldwell Table has 30 days to cure existing lease defaults under the notice served this morning. After that, ownership will pursue all remedies available. Vendors with unpaid invoices should speak to their attorneys. Investors should request audited financials before writing another check. The room erupted, not loudly at first. Whispers, questions. A glass set down too hard. Someone near the kitchen cursed. Brandon walked toward me. Dana moved between us. Tara stepped beside her. Brandon stopped. His eyes were wet now. "You ruined me." I looked at my brother, the boy who got Italy, the man who stole my future and called it family support. "No," I said. I stopped financing the performance. Dad grabbed my arm. His fingers dug into my sleeve. "Sophie, you do not walk into your brother's night and humiliate him." I looked down at his hand, then back at him. "You walked into my life and signed my name." He let go, not because he wanted to, because half the room was watching. I placed the microphone on the bar. Then I walked out with Dana, Andrea, Tara, and Mrs. Alden behind me. Outside, the April air smelled like rain and exhaust and freedom. Tara touched my shoulder. "I am sorry," she said. "You left when you knew." "I wish I had known sooner." "Me too." Mrs. Alden squeezed my hand. "My husband would have liked you." I laughed then. A real laugh. Small but mine. The fallout came fast. The food blogger posted the clip. Someone else posted another angle. By morning, Caldwell Table was not a restaurant opening. It was a cautionary tale. Investors pulled back. 2 vendors filed collections. Harbor Line pursued Brandon and my father. The police investigation moved slowly, but it moved. My father called me 11 times in one day. I did not answer. Mom texted. "I know mistakes were made, but did you have to destroy him publicly?" I replied. "He used my name publicly to build a business. I corrected the record in the same room." She did not answer for 3 days. Then, I did know. Not everything at first, but enough. I told myself your father had it handled. I'm sorry. It was the closest she had ever come to accountability. I wrote back, enough is the word that matters. Brandon sent one message. You could have just let me fix it. I replied, you had a year. Then I blocked him for 6 months. That sounds harsh until you remember he had used my social security number like a spare key. The legal process did not give me dramatic closure. My father accepted a plea agreement related to false statements and identity misuse. Brandon entered a diversion program tied to financial fraud charges, restitution and probation. Mom was not charged, though her silence cost her socially in ways she cared about more than she admitted. Caldwell Table closed after 3 months. The space did not sit empty long. Andrea knew a chef named Priya Shah who had run a successful pop-up for years and had clean books, strong references, and no interest in using relatives as collateral. We leased the building to her. She opened a small restaurant called Marigold Room. The food was better. The rent arrived on time. I bought the Queen Village condo 18 months after losing the first one. Not the same unit, a better one. 2 bedrooms. Morning light, balcony large enough for 2 chairs. Basil, rosemary, and a lemon tree that had no business surviving Philadelphia winter, but tried anyway. My credit recovered slowly. Not magically. Fraud leaves fingerprints even after systems say cleared. I still had to explain. Still had to submit letters. Still had to watch loan officers read my file with polite concern. But this time I had documentation. And I had something else. A life that did not require my family's version of peace. My grandmother visited the condo first. She was 84 and walked with a cane that looked decorative until she used it to point at things she disliked. She stepped onto the balcony and looked at the basil. You named it. Not yet. Good. Plants should earn names. She sat in the chair beside me and handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $10,000. I stared. Grandma number? Yes. I cannot take this. You can. I should have asked more questions when your father told me you were confused. I did not. This is not payment. It is apology with interest. I cried then. She pretended to inspect the lemon tree. Caldwells were talented at avoidance. Some of us used it kindly. Others used it as a weapon. A year later, I started a small nonprofit with Dana and Marisol's help. Second Signature Project. We helped identity theft victims navigate police reports, credit freezes, lender disputes, and the emotional nightmare of being told by strangers that your own name belongs to someone else's debt. The first workshop had 7 people. The second had 19. By the fourth, we had a waiting list. People came with folders, envelopes, shaking hands. A college student whose mother opened utilities in his name. A retired teacher whose son used her credit for gambling debt. A woman whose husband forged her signature on business loans and then called her disloyal for leaving. At every workshop, I said the same thing. You are not cruel for documenting the truth. Some people cried at that sentence. I understood. I had once needed it too. 2 years after the grand opening, Brandon wrote me a letter. Not a text, not a voicemail. A letter, 6 pages. The first 2 were defensive. I almost stopped reading. Then the tone changed. He wrote, I thought needing something meant deserving it. I thought because Mom and Dad always found a way for me, the way was harmless. I knew using your information was wrong. I told myself it was temporary because temporary sounded better than theft. I am sorry I made you pay for my dream before I earned the right to have one. That sentence stayed with me. Before I earned the right to have one. I did not forgive him then, but I kept the letter. Mom and I have coffee 3 times a year now. Neutral places. Public places. She apologizes better than she used to. Sometimes she still slips into your father thought, or we were under pressure. When she does, I look at her until she corrects herself. I chose not to stop it, she will say. Then we continue. Dad and I do not speak. I am not saying never. I no longer make permanent promises on behalf of future versions of myself. But the present version is peaceful without him. And peace, once you have had to rebuild it from fraud reports and police forms, becomes something you guard carefully. The Marigold Room is thriving. Sometimes, I sit at the corner table, the one near the window Brandon wanted reserved for influencers, and eat Priya's cardamom rice pudding, while watching people enjoy a place that nearly became my ruin. It feels strange, not triumphant exactly. Full circle is too neat. Life is not a circle. It is more like a ledger, not because everything balances. It often does not, but because entries matter. Debits, credits, losses, recoveries, what was taken, what was rebuilt, what remains outstanding. If you are listening because someone in your family has used your name, your credit, your labor, your silence, or your loyalty as if it belonged to them, I want you to hear me. You are allowed to call it what it is. Even if they call it help, even if they call it family, even if they cry, even if everyone says you are making things worse by refusing to keep absorbing the damage, you did not create the wound by naming the weapon. Keep records, save the texts, print the emails, freeze your credit, call the bank, file the report, tell someone outside the family system. Abuse thrives in rooms where everyone has agreed to speak softly. Documentation turns the lights on. My name is Sophie Caldwell. I am 34 now. My credit is mine again. My home is mine. My signature is mine. That may sound obvious to people who have never had family. Treat their identity like a shared resource. To me, it feels like a prayer. My brother's dream failed because it was built on fraud. Mine survived because I built it on receipts boundaries and people who understood that love does not require financial self-destruction. I still have the first credit summary Denise Patel printed for me at First Harbor Bank. It is folded in a file behind the deed to my condo. Sometimes I look at it before workshops, not to reopen the wound, to remember the woman standing in the rain realizing her family had stolen the future she was about to buy. I want her to know we got another one. Not the same future, a better protected one. And if your family has ever told you that protecting yourself will destroy them, listen carefully. What they usually mean is that your silence was part of their plan. Break the plan. Keep your name. Sign nothing that costs you your life. And never let people who stole your future call your evidence betrayal.